Hi, this is Pastor Jim Driscoll, pastor of Christ Lutheran Church with the NCTV 45 thought for the day. Yes, the hair looks terrible because of the chemotherapy I'm going through, but I'd like to do something a little different this week. I served in the United States Coast Guard for 29 years. I have more than 2,000 hours on Coast Guard small boats. Two of them are over my head, the 47 and the 44-foot motor lifeboats. 41-foot utility boat and smaller boats. I also spent 4 years in naval coastal warfare, being deployed, OCONUS, that is out of the United States, to provide coastal force protection to American and Allied forces. Coast Guard has been combat involved in every American war since the Barbary Pirates in 1790. While still doing our search and rescue and law enforcement duties, often while the smart mouths are in garrison going home to their families every night. Must be nice. There is a lot of smart mouth putzes out there that like to mouth off about how the Coast Guard is not as badass as the other services. Yeah, well, I've had much more badass than most of those putzes. When there is no war going on, the Coast Guard is still facing the many dangers, going out in hazardous weather, dealing with human traffickers, drug smugglers, fishery issues, pollution, port security, and of course, search and rescue, and all kinds of weather and law enforcement, all kinds of issues. While some people just have to go and shoot bad guys, we are also in the bad guy business full time, not just in declared wars. While so many of the smart guys have been in garrison for these past years, the Coast Guard goes out 24/7, 360, looking for bad guys, rescuing those who get caught up in bad weather, those who want to do damage to the United States. Myself and one other were sent out to determine what was attached to a bridge support of one of the largest bridges going into Boston on New Year's Eve, no less. We didn't think it was an explosive to blow up the bridge. Imagine the life lost in blowing up a bridge going into Boston with ferries transporting people back and forth. New Year's Eve, we had to get up on that attachment and figure out what it was there for, since the local police department and Coast Guard Marine Safety Office didn't know. Lots of people really unhappy with us for closing everything down. Would have been much happier if they were a casualty of explosion of mass destruction. Just saying. Anyway, I'm going to quote from Rescue Warriors by David Halberg over some of the great rescues of the United States Coast Guard. I'm first going to talk about Joshua James, the greatest lifesaver in Coast Guard history, credited with saving over 1,000 lives at sea in some of the worst weather conditions. Yes, weather that would make those smart mouths wilt like pansies. I mean the flower, of course. Captain James was only 10 years old when he saw the schooner Hepzibah capsize, taking his mother and baby sister to their deaths. At 15, he snuck aboard a surfboard to help rescue people off the vessel Mohawk. In 1876, the Massachusetts Humane Society appointed him full-time keeper of their lifeboats, mortar, line throwing gun station in Home, Massachusetts. Tomorrow, one of the greatest days in Coast Guard history by Captain Joshua James. I'm Jim Driscoll, pastor of Christ Lutheran Church. We're at 1302 East Washington Street, Newcastle, Pennsylvania. Check us out on the web. It's Christ Lutheran-Newcastle.org. Questions, comments, contact me on the website. For our transcript of today's thought, go to RevJamesDriscollMDiv.com. Sunday worship is at 10:30 a.m. All are welcome with the NCTV 45 thought for the day. God bless your day. Hi, this is Pastor Jim Driscoll of Christ Lutheran Church with the NCTV 45 Thought for the Day. I started to discuss Captain Joshua James, then of the Massachusetts Humane Society. This, along with the Revenue Service and Lighthouse Service, were merged together in 1915 to form the United States Coast Guard. I'm taking this from David Halberg from his book Rescue Warriors. Lots of badass stuff from the Coast Guard going back 235 years, standing by to rescue and keep the American public safe 24/7, 365. We are always confronting the next crisis. We really don't spend any time in garrison. We usually don't get to go home to our families every night. Captain James became the station keeper at Point Allerton Station in Home, Massachusetts in 1876. And during that time, he became the most famous maritime rescuer in history, pulling people to safety in the heaviest weather and difficult circumstances. I've read his story many times and can't imagine what James and his crew did. But there again, the Coast Guard is regularly called on to do the impossible under the most difficult circumstances with the minimum of equipment. Case in point, on quote, November 25th and 26th, 1888, during which he braved blizzards, sleet, rain, and mountainous waves to lead his crew in the rescue of 29 men from 6 different ships. Side note, I really hate autumn, and this is why. By far, my biggest adventures have been in the time of the year when the weather is really worse. Yeah, there's snow and blizzards in New England, but hurricanes, tornadoes, thunderstorms, all kind of weather in the fall in New England, and can be really miserable. I'm sure the loudmouth putzes couldn't handle any of that. Anyway, on those faithful days, these are the most famous of Captain Joshua James. Quoting David Halberg from his book Rescue Warriors, it started on the afternoon of the 25th of November with the 3-masted schooner Cox and Green trapped in the surf. James's crew dragged the mortar and surfboard half a mile to the site. The mortar was to fire the lifeline to the other ship. They fired the line to the ship and soon had rigged a breeches buoy that brought all 9 crewmen safely ashore. Okay, let's explain some of the nomenclature, the jargon. A mortar is a military mortar, but instead of sending a shell to a target, this is used to send a line to the target, a heavy line, in order to be used for rescue. Once a line, rope is for something that isn't in use. Line is being as a rescue line to a boat. A surf boat is designed to go through the surf on a beach in order to reach a disabled vessel. It's usually rowed by 6 men and can roll over and come back up if the surf knocks it down. A breeches buoy is attached to the line that is sent out to the stricken vessel. Person gets in like a pair of pants, hence breeches, and one at a time, people are safely taken off the boat. It's usually for men and mostly for sailors. To reach the breeches buoy, you have to climb up the sails, masts, and rigging, go out on a yardarm to get into the buoy. Not something for the timid, but beats drowning in the cold Atlantic Ocean. I'm Jim Driscoll, a pastor of Christ Lutheran Church, 1302 East Washington Street, Newcastle, Pennsylvania. Check us out on the web, christlutheran-newcastle.org. Questions, comments, contact me on the website. For a transcript of today's thought, go to revjamesdriscollmdiv.com. Sunday worship is 10:30 a.m. All are welcome with the NCTV 45 thought for the day. God bless your day. Hi, this is Pastor Jim Driscoll, Christ Lutheran Church with the NCTV 45 thought for the day. By the way, I forgot to mention too, there's the two lifeboat that you see over my shoulder. It's a 44 motor lifeboat, and that's a 47-foot motor lifeboat. Also, there's a crewman of the station, and those guys would walk along the beach looking for boats that had crashed into the rocks or beach or low water, somehow disabled. They'd wave that big red flag, or in later years, light a light, and to signal the station that they saw they have a disabled vessel that's in need of rescue. Anyways, we've been talking about the extreme hazard that the United States Coast Guard men and women work in every day, and some of the highest examples of the bravery exhibited by them. This is partly in response to those who show a lot of disrespect to the Coast Guard, which manages to respond to danger and to rescues 24/7, 365. Most remembered rescue in Coast Guard history was on rescues in Coast Guard history was on November 25th and 26th, 1888. On that day, Captain James and his crew battled blizzard, sleet, rain, and mountainous waves to lead his crew to rescue 29 men on 6 different ships. Again, a feat that boggles the mind. As you recall from yesterday's thought, the Point Alton Station crew, which I was a proud member of for 20 years, had just finished getting the crew off the 3-masted schooner Cox and Green. Quoting Halberg, just as they were finishing the rescue, the schooner Gertrude Abbott slammed into the rocks a little farther up the beach, as in the wild surf beyond range of the line-throwing gun. Let me explain. The line-throwing gun is intended to send the line over to the disabled vessel in order to send a breeches buoy over to the ship, or a life car, which was a coffin-like apparatus where the person would get in, lay down, and usually pull a cover over himself. Now that's a thrill ride. Climb into the mast of a sinking ship, slide out over the yardarm, over a raging sea, gingerly open the life car, slide in, and pull the cover closed, and be pulled to shore over a roaring sea by a bunch of Coast Guardsmen. You won't get that thrill anywhere else. Quoting Alberg, well, Captain Joshua James asked for volunteers to man the surf boat. Everyone volunteered, although the risk of a watery death was quite real. Several times, their boat filled with seawater and tossed back onto the beach there before they were able to fight their way through the shore break. Finally, they reached the bow of the boat, where 8 sailors managed to jump into the rescue boat. The boat hit a rock, nearly capsized 200 yards offshore. A giant wave took the boats over the surf, smashing it to pieces on the cobbled shore. Amazingly, everyone escaped injury. That is a ride you would never forget, except for the nausea, hypothermia, exposure, and exhaustion. That you might not forget. I'm Jim Driscoll, the pastor of Christ Lutheran Church, 1302 East Washington Street, Newcastle, Pennsylvania. Check us out on the web, ChristLutheranNewcastle.org. Questions, comments, contact me on the website. For a transcript of today's thought, go to RevJamesDriscollMDiv.com. Sunday worship is at 10:30 a.m. All are welcome. With the NCTV 45 thought for the day, God bless your day. Hi, this is Pastor Jim Driscoll of Christ Lutheran Church with the NCTV 45 thought for the day. Last time we met, we were talking about a famous 2 days in Coast Guard history with Captain Joshua James, station keeper at Point Alton Station in Hull, Massachusetts, where I'm proud to say that I served for 20 years. No, not the same time as Captain James, as I've been accused of. Ha ha, very funny. The days were November 25 and 26, 1888, where Captain James and his Point Allerton crew rescued 29 men off of 6 ships. We're now on ship number 3, the Bertha Walker. Quoting David Halberg from his book Rescue Warriors at 3 a.m. That's 0300 hours for you military types. Yes, we go out 24/7. And as the old timers like to say, you have to go out, but you don't have to come back. Quoting Halberg at 0300 hours, another schooner, the Bertha F. Walker, grounded in the surf. Horses and volunteers dragged a new surfboard to the side of the wreck from a station 4 miles away. James, at the sweep oar, that's the oar that steers the lifeboat, led his crew into the rescue of the 7 sailors aboard. Captain and another crewman had earlier been swept away, unquote. Now we proceed to rescue 4, remember, less than 48 hours of each in blizzard conditions. Yeah, welcome to New England. Quoting Halberg, as they were bringing the survivors ashore, a man on horseback brought them less than the thrilling news that 2 more ships were in distress 5 miles down the beach. By the time they dragged their boat to this next scene, 2 other rescue crews had managed to foul their shot lines in the rigging of the schooner H.C. Higginson. James's crew silently watched their boat, maybe grudgingly. I wouldn't blame them, only to be driven ashore 45 minutes later, holed in 2 places. That is, there were 2 holes in the boat. After patching their ruptured boat, they launched again, almost flipping over backward off the near vertical faces of the waves. The crew of the Higginson had been lashed to the rigging for 14 hours and could barely move. It's a miracle they didn't die of hypothermia. By the time Joshua James and his crew reached them, they had to pry their hands free before returning them through the crashing surf safely to shore. I'm Jim Driscoll, the pastor of Christ Lutheran Church. That's at 1302 East Washington Street, Newcastle, Pennsylvania. Check us out on the web. It's christlutheran-newcastle.org. Questions, comments, contact me on the website. For a transcript of today's thought, go to revjamesdriscollmdiv.com. Sunday worship is at 10:30 a.m. All are welcome. For the NCTV 45 thought for the day, God bless your day. Come on. Hi, this is Pastor Jim Driscoll at Christ Lutheran Church with the NCTV 45 thought for the day. When last we met, Captain Joshua James, station keeper, Point Allerton Station in Hull, Massachusetts, where I proudly served for 20 years, James and his crew made their 4th rescue of the crew of the Higginson. This in less than 48-hour period in the blizzard and cold seas of New England in late November. And believe me, it's cold and wet. The other boat, reported in distress, ran aground and the crew made it to shore. Thinking they were done for the day, the Point Allerton crew started back to the station, reported they had been schlepping a fairly large heavy lifeboat, a motor, a mortar, and the attachments to the line throwing gun. But that's not all. On the way back to the station, quoting David Halberg's book, Rescue Warriors, they had to launch their boat to pull salvagers off the grounded brigantine Alice. The salvagers is it's sort of a name, slightly above pirates, where they have the right to go aboard boats that are unmanned and adrift, and to salvage all the gear on the boat, which is definitely not a safety conscious, and it's on the very, very line of legality, but still, they had to go to the rescue. Um, this is off the brigantine Alice that had slipped its moorings in Gloucester the day before. Basically, that boat made it from Gloucester on the North Shore of Boston to Hull on the south side of Boston. Gives you an idea of how bad the storm was. That's a distance of about 40 miles, give or take, and all open sea. Back to Halberg. James and his men would be awarded gold life-saving medals. These are the highest awards in life-saving in the same sense as the Medal of Honor. And they got to sleep in the next day. Ooh, they didn't have to work the next day, basically. James was the station keeper until he was 75 years old, having been awarded a special waiver from the head of the life-saving service, Sumner Kimball. In 1898, at the age of 72, he led Humane Society and life-saving crews in the rescue of 20 men from 4 ships during the famous Portland gale that took 500 lives. Captain James was conducting a life-saving drill at Point Allerton Station. After an hour's workout and rolling windy seas, he directed them back to the beach. Stepping into the wet sand, he looked out again to see the tide is ebbing, he noted, and then fell dead upon the shore. A fitting end to a legendary life, unquote. Our matey, what a way to go. You have to go out, but you don't have to come back. And a great legend to a legendary life, Joshua James. I met his great nephew at the station once, which is, yeah, okay, but you know. I'm Jim Driscoll, the pastor of Christ Lutheran Church, 1302 East Washington Street. That's in Newcastle, Pennsylvania. Check us out on the web. It's christlutheran-newcastle.org. Questions, comments, contact me on the website. For a transcript of today's thought, go to revjamesdriscollamdiv.com. Sunday worship is at 10:30 a.m. All are welcome with the NCTV 45 thought for the day. God bless your day.